Hello and welcome to the End of Seeking podcast, episode 22. What, you're not ready? You're giving me a timeout?
Timeout, I need to move my mic. I switched positions and now I need to adjust.
So, what's going on?
No pressure. There has been a repeated conversation that's been coming up, both between us, but particularly in my sessions, with regard to my sessions, and observations of the necessity for what I would call the descent into and the embodiment of awakening.
Yeah, but the descent into what? What do you think?
Into the felt realm, into the heart. As a shorthand, I would use the descent into the heart. But even just using that word sort of limits it, in the mind's eye at least. It limits it in terms of a conception, but broadly speaking, that's what I would refer to it as. And just the acknowledgement that there can be a really, really clear awakening, a self-realization, a recognition of, oh, I am not this mind-body. Oh, I am not this changing shorthand human content. I am prior to that. And rather than sort of get too theoretical about it, I mean, it's something that I've been exploring with people in a literal, practical sense. Of what does that look like? What does that feel like? And to me, it's the call out of the conceptual, out of the mind and into the being, the heart, the thusness, the felt, lived experience. And it's often punctuated by a meeting of a feeling. And I mean that not in terms of the feelings as we would describe them.
Emotions, per se.
No, but
although it does include it. Sometimes.
It does absolutely include it. But it's the sort of the felt experience of life, and it's often we don't want to go there because it does get uncomfortable. There is a pull that gets missed, I think.
Right.
And it's a real visceral, felt pull. And I look at a lot of particularly non-dual type teachings, which is stuff that we've been exposed to a lot. And the energy of it's very heady, it's very high up, it's very sort of, it's very much in the mind, it's very conceptual still.
Even when the concepts are not there, it's still kind of in a sort of a... It's defined by the absence of the...
Exactly,
of the
it's still in relation to concepts.
Relation,
yeah, it's not in relation to... I love that, yeah. It's not in relation to the felt. It's in relation to the concept, even, like you said, even the absence of a concept. And somehow there's a subtle negation or denial of the felt experience of it prior to the concepts. I used this example in a session earlier today as like... the concept is a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. Now, those words don't really mean anything, but they do point to an underlying differentiated reality of tea versus coffee.
Yeah.
And it's only when we sink into the actual experience of tea versus coffee, not the conceptual difference of it, the idea of the difference and where it comes from and what does it mean and all of the rest of it, but just the actual literal felt differentiation of it.
I think there's this there's a philosophical, let's say, viewpoint right now, and it's something in the realm of postmodern thinking that says that all these concepts and all these ideas that we use, they point to no actual reality.
That.
Right? And that so you can make reality up as you want. It's just a function of language, this idea that language creates reality. Yeah. Which is half true.
Yeah.
Right? So there's this half truth that, how we use language informs how we respond to the underlying reality, but they miss the fact that there is an underlying reality. Exactly. It's non-conceptual, and language and concepts are used as best they can to point to at least some embodied reality, even though we know that embodied reality is relative, it's passing, it's transient, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But it's not empty theorizing, rooted to nothing, pointing to nothing except another concept. Exactly.
And so when awakening takes hold of that, the idea, the initial, and I would say just early stages of awakening, really, it when there's a seeing through the false reality of who and what we think we are, there isn't yet maybe a place in which there can be an understanding of the felt reality. It's like sort of pushed away or negated. I'm not quite getting to what I mean to say here, but
well, there's a bypass that can happen. I think that's you see this early stages of awakening where you, or even before, or just more relative awakenings where you go, I'm not my thoughts. Mm-hmm. And then, the initial abiding recognition of that is, I'm not my thoughts. But then you get this concept that another thing, well, I'm nothing at all.
That's what I was trying to get to, yeah.
And those aren't the same thing.
Yeah, none of this exists. It's that. And that's a conceptual idea. None of this exists, and is sort of partially true in terms of
half true,
the conceptual. Yeah, I like that, half true. The conceptual sort of relationship to it falls away, yes.
The concept isn't the thing.
Yeah. But so you're still living, breathing, like in this. Even if you drop the conceptual idea of world, you're still rooted in an experience.
Yeah, and it has its own nature, right? It has the conditioned realm, let's say, or the relative existence or phenomenal existence. It has its own existence, quotes, as a phenomenal realm. Mm-hmm. It's not nothing.
No.
But it's empty in the sense that the Buddhists would use the term empty, not empty as we might use it as just a formless awareness. That idea of empty is empty in the sense that it's empty of any permanent existence, permanent reality. Yeah. So they use emptiness in that term. So it's all well and good to get rid of the thoughts. I'm not my thoughts. But if you think that thoughts are all there is, when the thoughts are gone and you recognize that those thoughts and those concepts weren't ever real in themselves, you could still miss the fact that the thoughts were let's say an attempt of the organism to describe and formulate the actual reality. Yeah. What's the underlying reality? What is being itself, and is there another layer of experience, I think is you're pointing to, that missed when we're all head conceptual. Where's the rest of it? What's left when the thoughts are gone? There's being and there's felt sense. I think this is what you're...
and actually it's almost like a different language.
Right.
And what I'm, over the years of working with people, what I'm really sort of coming to understand every day deeper and deeper is that because it's like a different language, it's often dismissed because we don't know that language. It's dismissed, like we don't even spot it. And so it's actually about coming to learn how to speak the language of the felt.
Right.
And that is not done by the head.
No.
It's done by the heart, to speak the language of the felt experience of life. And time and time again, and I put myself in this category as well, or would have, let's say, put myself in this category, of being so utterly and woefully ill-prepared of what it means to contend with the felt level of life and be with that, and you know, like we've got so many tools to help us manage the sort of the mind
we're
level.
Top heavy, aren't we?
But
we're
so ill prepared to meet our felt experience of life. And so again and again I come into bump into people who, you know, just simple things like, you know, you've got a afflictive thought. Well, where what does that feel like in the body as well?
Right.
And they've got no language for that. They've got no first of all, they don't even know to go looking.
Yeah, that there's this for every, you know, thought, particularly the afflictive ones, but in thoughts in general, that if it's a, you know, pointing at something real, it is pointing at something real, and it has a felt correlate.
It does. And
Somatic.
what I've noticed is that felt correlate. That is like such a tricky word for me. Like I think yesterday it kept coming up in sessions, and I was like, I cannot say that word for the life of me.
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to try.
Correlate.
Oh God. Yeah, that word.
Yeah.
So there's a felt
correlate.
Yep. To that afflictive mentation.
So we think it's the mentation that's causing us the trouble.
Yeah, but it's actually it's something arising in the felt experience of life, and the mentation is actually a way of it can be a way of actually avoiding really sinking into and being with that felt experience. It's a way of sort of wrapping it up in a box and putting that box on the shelf and going, okay, I am feeling fear or I'm feeling sadness. And it's actually a way of not feeling that, is to think you know what you're feeling and to put a concept around it and an idea and name it and be certain about it. And then, okay, now I don't have to think about that.
Well, that's it. It's this idea that if a thought arises, like an afflictive thought that arises, I'd see the mechanism as something like this: that the afflictive thought arises on the basis of an afflictive of an unintegrated feeling, sensation, something in the body. Mm-hmm. It's on that feeling level. The thought points to that. Oh, and it actually is an attempt in some sense spontaneously sort of describe it and define it, whatever. But what we do then is try to fix it on the level of the thinking, which is what I'm saying. The thoughts aren't the thing, though. Right?
No, and actually, so in my experience, when someone is trying to describe what they're feeling, most of the time I would believe that they're trying to do that too prematurely.
Right.
Because it's often we haven't actually spent enough time with that feeling and into the depths of that feeling in order to actually know what we're dealing with there. Yeah. We might feel the surface level of it and, okay, that doesn't feel good. I don't like that. And it takes a new set of language and a new set of skills, I think, to be able to really know what you're meeting.
Right.
And the energy of it, to me, is a very different energy in terms of the skills or the tools that you use. Is the word that I continually come back to is a softening, an opening. when I think of like self-inquiry in terms of the mind, it has a clarity and a sharpness to it. It has a bright light sort of energy to it, a very discerning sort of sword-like energy almost.
That's very very symbolic.
Yeah.
Because in the tarot, the sword, or in the esoteric thinking, the sword is, the sword of the intellect. It's the sword of the mind and the intellect. It has its own domain.
And you're just connecting some dots to me that has never even occurred to me until this moment.
Whereas the cups then
that's
is
exactly
about
where I was going.
Dropping it at the felt sense.
And that's that opening, that sense of holding, that sense of the when you're dealing with the felt realm, the energy is that, yes, the cup, the vessel, the crucible, the womb. I would use that word. And what I often point people to is to find that sort of, if you're looking to come out of your mind and into your felt realm, into your heart, there's an energy to it, a dropping. It's like almost like the water dropping into the cup very softly and steadily and sort of just pouring in.
It's receptive.
Exactly. And so you can actually use that sort of dropping energy to have the attention be drawn to the felt sense of it all. And it's a very different manner in which you approach this, I would say. It's not a pushing energy at all. It's not a sharp energy at all. It's a much, much, much tender, softer. Actually, even another symbolic sort of thing, it's very feminine in its way, whereas the mind, that energy is very masculine in its way. And it's not to say male or female, it's to say feminine and masculine. And we have it all within us, but it's a different manner in which you need to approach this work. Is in that much softer, tender,
receptive,
open, listening, deep listening, not listening with something in mind of what you think you're going to get out of it.
But it's feeling listening, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's deep sensing, not discriminating in the same way as...
Exactly, you're not using your mind in that listening. You're not trying to draw conclusions, you're not trying to get final answers or judgments. You're not trying to get to a final place. It is a deep listening with unending patience and an unending inclusion of folding everything into that listening. Yes. And I think I certainly was this, like, so unversed in what that looks like, what that feels like.
Well, I think back to, how it all sort of unpacked for me, and I see how it generally unpacks through things like, practice and satsang in particular, self-inquiry, which became and it's so important and it's so critical to employ discrimination and self-reflection in that discriminating way, to see what is, what isn't, to point to reality, to point to your experience in a very, very clear and precise way, to make those discriminations of what's true, what's not true, what's real, what's not real.
Yeah.
And so that's it's almost like it needs to come first somehow. It's almost like that discrimination itself has... It seems to tend to... maybe it's just a tradition I'm in, but
I think it typically does.
It seems to be that need to discriminate is a key... I think that discrimination starts quite early on in the process anyway, to say, whether this is good, this is bad. That's a sort of...
But I also think it comes from the fact that our cultural norms is to live from and give value to the mind and its discriminative tool.
Maybe.
And I think we're very particularly in this culture, we're very orientated that way. So it makes sense that would be at least more available for most people.
At the forefront,
Yeah.
But yeah, but I see and I saw, it was interesting, and I saw it in you, and I've seen it in others, and I saw it in myself, that, funnily enough, that the awakening comes about, and it's almost like, even though it was always there, the felt sense was always there, always part of it. It wasn't front and foremost. Mm-hmm. And then this sort of the clarity of seeing comes, and I am not my thoughts, I am not a construct, I am consciousness itself, becomes a very, very obvious fact. But there's this felt sense that actually starts, my experience, to start to rise up and make its presence known really profoundly in a way that I went, oh, I hadn't really accounted for that.
Yeah.
Even though it's arising within this clarity.
Well, I think because typically in that clarity, the thoughts start to quieten down as well. And I think again, not for everyone, but for a lot of people it does. The sort of the thoughts as they lose their solidity, and they become more transparent, let's say, more energetically lighter.
Yeah. Well, it opens the field up, though, doesn't it? When the thoughts are kind of popped as a field, let's say, you step beyond that, the field of being itself becomes more like an untroubled ocean or something like that, even though it's not untroubled. But I don't know. I'm trying to throw a metaphor out. It's not quite working. Carry on.
I don't know where I was going.
It liberates.
Yeah.
When the energy is gone and attention is less on the thoughts, because the thoughts themselves tend to diminish considerably.
Yeah.
A whole new vista of experience tends to has opened up.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to inhabit and appreciate and discern and feel what that field of experience is.
Well, to be able to speak that language of the felt field of life. And so, really, I believe takes some time, some exploration, but it's a different kind of exploration. It's not an exploration led by the mind, led by thoughts and labels and concepts and ideas of right and wrong. It's led by the visceral, somatic aliveness of the body, of the felt experience of life. And it doesn't really require the mind to be labeling what that is. It is just sinking into that experience and living from that experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when it's what I've experienced when working with people, that they can often have a very clear a clarity. They have clarity about what is, what isn't on that level. But it really becomes quite clear, and I feel it in my body. I'm like, you need to drop down into out of the head and into the heart. And it seems like a really embodied thing to say. It's out of the realm of just, discriminate, see this, see that. It's like, I'm asking you now to take your attention and drop into the heart.
Yeah.
Drop into that the physical region of the heart, and see and start not just look down at it from up top, look down, but come from there. Cynthia Bourgeault talks about, I love it, and talks about the importance of the heart, and talked about even the region of the heart. Ramana Maharshi, Nisargadatta talked about this as well. It's when awakening is beyond such considerations. True awakening. Well, I read the other day, Ramana, someone had said to him, "Where's the self located in the body?" And he talked about in the region of the heart, slightly to the right.
Mm-hmm.
There's this little point of, and we often experience, a heart, the heart as being a significant, the physical region of the heart to be sort of a significant sort of spiritual sense. And Cynthia Bourgeault talks about it, says, the understanding the heart as not as a pumping organ, but as an organ of spiritual perception.
Yeah.
Let's say, on organ quotes, but Ramana would say, yeah, it's there, and that can be helpful to locate it actually and drop into that, to be in that region, to identify with and as and from that region. It's embodied. This is part of the thing. Yeah. Of course, awakening.
And it's felt.
Yeah, and of course, awakening itself is beyond those considerations. That's once self-realization is fully
matured,
and it's clear that there's no particular place where the self is, because it's all the self. But there's this place that we need, that a lot as in our process we have to drop down into
in
that,
the earlier stages of awakening.
But even with people who are awake,
but it's yet to be fully embodied.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean about the maturity. The maturity is that embodiment process.
But I saw it so much that just that need to drop down into that, and what it's really saying is drop into your felt sense.
Yeah.
That it's somehow that embodied instruction or pointing is actually about, it seems to be, and you can experience it in yourself. If someone's dropped down into your heart, suddenly it feels that you are coming out of your head, for example, and are coming out of the meditation. It's a simple practice. It's a simple observation that if you can just drop your attention down into your heart, then it almost like turns up the feeling, the sensing, the subtle sensing, and less of the meditation. It can be quite a powerful.
Yeah, and so as I started to say earlier, and I'll maybe just double down on that, of like, practically speaking, what does that look like? And there's many ways into that, but the one that I've found to be most helpful for people in recent times that I've been experiencing, and of course I could update this next week and go, oh no, actually something else is, but a simple little technique, I could call it, although I've never codified it in such a way, but is really, obviously starting with some deep breaths or something, and really allowing yourself to just sink into the body, feeling your feet on the ground. So the sense of, resting into the body. And what you start to become aware of when you do rest into the body there is this deep pull. And it's like a weight, a fishing weight almost, like that sense of deep pulling into
gravity.
Yeah, gravity pull into sort of the body sense. It's very grounding energy, very soft, deep, ancient energy somehow. And what you might notice is that there comes a point where there's sort of like a here and no further often, like a sense of stopping. Mm-hmm. And to me, there's where we often find something that needs to be attended to on the felt level. And it's often something we've been avoiding. And yes, it has a correlation with often a thought, a memory, a belief, something like this. But to really allow ourselves to rest there and not assume that this place that we're drawn to is inhibiting that deepening. I would say it is that very place that is the door to our deepening.
Right. Yeah, I would say that gravity is very real in my own experience. Just the dropping in. If you sit, and actually I'm not sure whether it was a cloud of unknowing or one of something like that, like, talking about, and this was my experience, if you sit without really intending, without any meditating method, let's say, and you sit, and it might be nothing much happening, or it's just normal sitting and your attention is, maybe thinking about this or looking at that. But if you do it without necessarily picking up anything, and if you just sit quietly, it's almost like that call, that calling, that gravity, that pull makes itself known just in a small way sometimes.
Yeah.
Just, there. And so you can catch a ride on it then. Yeah. It's like you don't have to muster anything up. If you sit and wait long enough, quietly, you'll notice that gravity, right? You'll notice that calling, that pull.
The difficulty, however, comes where you meet that stopping point, point, and that becomes uncomfortable, and that's where there can be a disappearance back into the transcendence. I've noticed this sort of almost pulling back into nothingness. And actually, I would, at that point, is to stay in attendance with that uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
But yeah, that deep pulling, I believe, is always there if we start to attune to it and notice its presence. As you're saying, you sit and it becomes known. It
It's almost like as you settle into your, and you could call it a sort of a natural meditation in a sense, right? You catch a ride on this gravity and it pulls you down. There's a natural flow towards a more restful, subtle, and then so you at some point in this sort of, let's say, quotes, endless descent, deepening, you'll bump into something that will feel there might be some feeling of discomfort. That's what
contraction, emotion, physical uncomfortableness, intensity.
So what do you do with that then? What's the
well, this is where I would talk about the energy of softening, the energy of curious opening, to not try to push into that experience, to not try and fix or change that experience, to not even try and define that experience at that moment, to not try and...
So this is a somatic experiencing, not an intellectual defining, discriminating.
Because immediately when most people are orientated around the mind, they'll hit into something and they'll immediately try to describe it, they'll try to define it, they'll try to find its sort of why it's there, what it is, all of these kind of things. You're going straight up out of the physical felt sense of it. And so my encouragement would be, if you notice that's happening, to again use that drop that you can find to tune back into that felt sense, and allow yourself to, in many ways, to acclimatize to what it is you're feeling without trying to define what you're feeling, to be patient and open and receptive in your listening.
The word non-avoidance comes. It's a non-avoidance. It's not confronting. Nope. It's not going at like a Pac-Man trying to
not trying to achieve anything. No. Even
it's receptive, but it's also attentive, right?
Exactly. It's not a hands-off distance sort of witnessing that can sometimes be there in the mind where there's been a lot of practice of silence in the mind there. There can be a sort of a witnessing, let's say. But this is a different kind of witnessing. To bear witness to is to sit in with rather than to distance oneself from.
Well, here's the thing, isn't it, about this idea and notion of witnessing. If the idea of witnessing is purely on this sort of mental region, it's very cold. Mm-hmm. It's very, rarefied. And it feels distant when the notion of witness, being the witness, noticing it's you're separate from it. You're completely yes, but
this is
this is
manner.
integrating actually, because the witness is there, but it's the felt witness. It's right. It's that pure open awareness is there, but it's not just a cognitive thing. It's not just in the realm of discernment and discrimination. It's a knowingness at the level of the feeling.
Mm. Yeah, and so it's very active in its way. It's not distance.
Even though it's receptive. It's awake. It's fully awake and alive to what's
exactly. It's not a managing active.
No.
But it is in the same way you have active listening. You're not just sort of staying there.
It's not
silently.
Disinterested, is it?
Exactly.
I mean, it's not like I'm out of here. I don't. I as consciousness. I'm not interested and completely indifferent to what's arising. Yeah. It is perhaps something like a welcoming.
Yeah, it's a loving.
It's the lovingness of awareness, right? It's the lovingness of being. It's required in order to integrate is to have that lovingness. Yeah,
so it's witnessing with loving curiosity that which is being felt, and it doesn't come from the mind, and actually you can feel the energetic difference of where the energy sort of is drawn upward into the mind versus actually when you are really allowing yourself in that receptive witnessing place of loving curiosity. Again, that sort of elevator or that weight, that fishing weight of deepening is actually is felt in that uncomfortable sensation still. Yeah. So even that dropping, although it might slow right down, it's still a dropping deeper and deeper and deeper into that which is being felt.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I'm throwing contrast back to this very common awakening view of it being, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not thinking, I'm not concepts, get rid of all that. I'm nothing at all then. Or there is nothing.
Yeah, this is all
all
just an illusion.
And it's like, no. For me, when I awakened, very clearly the description I sort of put to what I experienced was, it was as if, and it still is, but it's sort of more how I live now. But it was like the conceptual overlay had been removed. Mm-hmm. Like I was living through a conceptual overlay.
Yeah, filter.
It's like, these, what do you call it? Acetate sheets, when you write things on and you put them on a projector, right? But it's like looking through a pair of glasses that's got writing on it and stuff. It's a bit like living in, Google Glass. It's like just everything you experience is, whether you're aware of it or not, is subtly defined, described, formulated, and
good, bad. This is the name of that. This is right. This is right. This is wrong.
You don't even know you're doing it, and often you're like a large percentage of how you experience the world is through this thinking prism.
Yeah, through the mind's relationship to what's being experienced.
So it's like so suddenly all that was stripped away, and it's so much so that it was just this singular energetic and perceptual unity, and I was going, what even is this, and where does one thing begin and another thing end? What even is a thing? Really,
I remember you looking out after we were in India and Rishikesh, and I remember you describing looking across the Ganga at the hills and the trees in the distance.
Yeah.
And I remember your description of that was the vivid. It's like everything had just been turned up the volume of the vivid
aliveness.
Exactly.
But it wasn't so. Everything before seemed apportioned. Oh, that's a tree. That's a hill. That's a river. That's that's this. That's that. Suddenly there was this, just this unity of aliveness. It was really fascinating. Still is. But but what's interesting is that you can see how if that awakening is just purely in the head, you don't even know you're still conceptualizing it by saying, I'm not my thoughts. Oh, there's nothing then. This is nothing. This is just.
Yeah, you're still relating to the concept, but now you're relating to the lack of concept.
Yes, exactly. But it's still relating to, you're still using concepts as a reference point.
Yeah.
But the experience was and is and continues to be, of a fullness of beingness. That's the isness of it, the presence of it it's not defined by an absence. No. And one has to be careful as this, that people can be more or less disconnected from the rest of being. That is, if you're super, super top heavy and all you think of is thoughts, then when those thoughts are seen to be, and that mentation is seen to be, not the thing in itself, not reality, then you can dismiss the whole of reality with it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. I'm just throwing out in the contrast. There's this depth and vastness of being.
Yeah.
And that being is
aliveness, the fullness of existence.
We have to inhabit and embody that. Where, even though the nature of this embodiment is transient, it's still right now present as an embodiment.
Even to recognize this is all a dream, as in it is all fleeting, it's dreamlike.
Dreamlike, yeah.
This dream is an embodied dream that is feeling and experiencing life in not just a conceptual dimension, but in a myriad of dimensions, and a lot of those dimensions are somatic, are felt, are experienced not just through the mind, but through all of our experiencing tools, senses.
Yeah. And I wonder that a lot of this is conditioned. I mean, arguably, I said before, enlightenment isn't a thing, but ignorance is. Mm. Enlightenment's our natural condition, free of conditioning. So, but looking at, how some people struggle with it more in this particular realm and some people less so, and how, as a culture, we do live top heavy. Mm-hmm. There's a guy, Ian McGilchrist, who's written a book called The Master and His Emissary, and he talks about, I haven't read the book, it's like 1,000 pages and I'm not going to get through it, but I've seen him interviewed a few times on it, and he's a researcher and an academic and a neurologist who's talked about the difference between the left and right brains. And what their functions are and what their relationship is to themselves. And it's this the left brain is very much the precision, the point, the mind as we think of it. Mm-hmm. Thoughts, definitions, precision, language,
and the language
analysis.
Of the left brain is very developed.
Yes,
for most of us.
And the right brain is more about wholeness, spatial. Intuition, felt sense, and all that. But it's open, and it is much more actually the right brain is much more akin to reality as it is. The right brain, the left brain wants to pin it down, wants to make precisions in it. But our society is so badly oriented towards this left brain that we risk destruction, actually, because it's super sharp and super clever and super amazing at defining things, and it's science and rationality and reason and language and all this stuff. But it isn't reality. It's a description of reality.
Yeah.
And
it's
the right brain better represents the nature of the reality, the openness, the connectivity of all things, things being differentiated but not fundamentally separate, that wholeness, and the way that we perceive in multi-dimensions all at the same time. Then the left brain helps us sort of, define and recognize and,
communicate.
He says,
the word you're after,
struggling to communicate. So, in some sense it is, and, an artist will attest to this, to get into that divergent mode of creative work, you're getting out of this narrow descriptions and definitions and analysis into this more open, spacious, receptive mode of being. Now, I would say these are so my view, I'm a consciousness first guy here. I would say that the neurology is really a manifestation of these modes of consciousness that show up as in physicality and neurology, but it points to the same idea, that this open, spacious, receptive, felt knowingness mode, as opposed to this precise defined, and we're so, as a culture, we're so far over onto the left that it risks actually destroying us, because it's an either or state of being as well. It's not a both and. Yeah. It's like, it's this or that. It's like this impulse. You have to say, you define it and take sides, pick this or that, right or wrong. And that can be terribly destructive, because reality actually is much more holistic, open,
and that's, to me, the difference between the heart and the mind, in terms of, if you're looking at it in terms of a hierarchy, and the same, you're just describing to me a little bit of a hierarchy, left sort of thinking, being less essential than...
Well, he calls it the master and his emissary. He's saying the master is in fact the right brain, and the emissary, then the one who communicates, and is the left brain.
And so I would say that with the mind as well, the mind and the heart as well. I would say the master is the heart, and the emissary the mind, and so typically most people have got the whole thing flipped the other way around.
Culturally, we have,
and I think that's why a lot of awakening initially goes to the mind. So there can be a mind awakening, a clarity of mind there, but there hasn't yet been an awakening of the heart, because that's seen as a lesser value, and so. I think that's why the maturity of awakening typically, not always, but typically sees a descent happening, a descent into the true master, in terms of the form, the true master being the heart.
Well, it's interesting what you started with this was that you have to learn a new language for this, and we don't have much of it, and the language perhaps that we do have is of the on that gets close to this, is the language of emotions. Let's say, and it isn't quite emotions.
No,
emotions is certainly part of this field.
But emotions are a mix
of thinking and feeling.
They're not. They're still too top heavy. They're still too associated with certain labels of sadness. Feeling sadness, but it's got...
The boxes are too defined, aren't
they? Exactly. And so that's why I'm talking a different language, because you do... The emotion, that's maybe one step beneath the mind of just the thoughts about that emotion, but there's something underneath that emotion.
Well, feeling is a field, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. If we, this emotion, that emotion, okay, fair enough. But again, it's almost like a left brain approach to feeling, whereas feeling is this fluid field.
Yeah, and it's the difference. I would say the difference between doing and being. In the mind coming at this field of being of the heart is looking to do that. I'm going to master being with my feelings.
Yes.
Right. And
this is sadness, right? Yeah, I'm going to deal with sadness.
And that's still a doing though, and that's the energy of that push energy, that sort of that energy that closes down around something and goes, I have my fist around this and I know what it is. Versus the energy of being is much more fluid, much more open, much more receptive, much more nuanced and subtle, and it's like the open palm versus the closed palm, actually, is what I would say.
And it's integrating, isn't it? I think that's the idea of particle versus wave. Again, it's this binary. Oh, this definite thing is distinct and I know what that is, and I can and yet actually the underlying reality of that seeming particle is a wave, a vibrational wave in a holistic field. And that's kind of the integrating power of dropping into this feeling field that can hold everything, because it is everything. It is the ocean that contains many waves, not just a singular wave or a multitude of waves.
Exactly.
It is, that act as individuals. It integrates all parts into its own wholeness.
Exactly.
And that the felt does that.
The felt does that because the felt can include the mind.
Yeah.
Whereas the mind struggles to include the felt, I would say. It can include it on a conceptual level, but in terms of the actual physicality of being with the felt level, the mind, you just have to look in your own experience to see that it is that you, if you stay in the mind with the felt, it's not possible. Like, it's just on the level of conception. It all just starts to feel empty. It starts to just, you go looking at it, it disappears again.
And the trouble with the mind as well, I don't know where I heard this, that mind is and actually by association, the ego is a great servant but a terrible master.
Yeah.
The mind can't lead.
No.
It doesn't know. Actually, it seems to know, but it doesn't know. It has no knowingness to it, and we know this because we can observe that the mind can work out any position and advocate for this, that, or other.
Flip flop all over the place.
Exactly, and make the case with such certainty for one thing, but it could flip and make the case with absolute certainty for something else. We need to beware the mind, and so one description of awakening is the mind drops into the heart, and then the heart is the master in the emissary. The heart then becomes the deep knowingness that guides, and that uses the mind as a valuable tool, but a limited tool. It's fragmented and partial, whereas the heart, the felt sense, this deep sense is integrated into its nature as wholeness and connectivity and relation.
Yeah. So I think more is being spoken about this, because I think it's becoming more and more apparent that an awakening of just the mind, whether it's seen that way or not consciously, whether it's seen that, oh, this is just an awakening of the mind, it seems to me has been happening more and more. You see more and more people waking up to the nature of the self. But I think why more and more these teachings are coming up generally now is because there's a recognition of the need to integrate and embody and descend.
Yeah.
To not negate our humanity, but actually to include it, and to recognize that our humanity our experience of living is not just a mistake that we've got to get through.
Yeah.
Not just an inconvenience, but actually the living embodiment of the divine.
Yeah.
And that, when lived from that, this is where we see things like divine love coming into action.
I think it's a natural, there's that idea, isn't it, when you're in satsang with someone and you meet someone where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also on a societal level. We start off, in the West anyway, particularly, with a very top-heavy, very cerebral, very intellectual, very rational, based culture and society. It all starts there. That's kind of where we are. And I love this idea of the gravity, of the call, I love that image you generate, the fishing weight dropping, taking itself down. Once actually the liberation, the self-realization actually occurs, non-duality, however you want to frame it, pops, it's quite natural that gravity at some point is gonna kick in and drop us into our deeper, into the fullness of our being. Actually, you drop us like that into we might have thought, oh, it's all here, great clarity, lovely, I'm awake, but then the inevitability of gravity is gonna act on us, and if we're that top heavy, once the structures that hold us, we're top heavy unnaturally. We're culturally top heavy. We're conditioned to top heavy. But once the naturalness is allowed to function, the depth will take us.
However, that depth, if met by seemingly unmeetable experiences such as fear and these kinds of things, we're going to think, oh, we're going somewhere where we shouldn't be going here.
Right.
It's going to immediately feel dangerous. It's going to immediately feel
not saying it's going to be pleasurable.
No.
Easy.
But so what I'm saying is, like, and I speak from my own experience here, is a lot started to come up post-awakening. And immediately I thought something was wrong. I've lost it. Oh, this is this shouldn't be. It's all supposed to be good from now on.
Yeah.
And actually what I've learned is awakening is like the lid coming off. And now the depths start to reveal themselves. The depths start to come into the light. And that's a very felt, visceral experience. And
can be, because we've been, let's say, sealed up and lidded off and contained, it can be quite a burst of painful experiencing.
Depending on how much has been. Is, yeah, I mean, for me, probably more than a lot of.
Yeah, some, but then not. There's some. There's a wide range, but
there is a wide range. There is a wide range indeed, and so this is what I mean about we don't have the tools, we don't have the facilities, the language to be able to handle that. A lot of the time, we don't have the support. Yeah, I didn't have.
We didn't know it. You don't know it's a thing.
No, and I think that's why it's always been so important to me to speak openly about this, and also to offer my support in this where I can, because to be going through that without the context for what's happening is terrifying.
Yeah.
there's so much wrongness, a sense of wrongness and shame that can be there, that further compounds the problem.
And another part of it is, in particularly in this realm of enlightenment teachings and awakening teachings, liberation. The perceived promise is, I'm going to be free of all discomfort, all affliction, everything that isn't pleasant.
Yeah.
And that's the idea that is actually the promise. And if there's, you come into awakening with clarity, but there's unintegrated shadow, there's unintegrated trauma, and you don't even know that it's there. I mean, that was the thing. That's what I saw with your experience afterwards. It was great for a while there, and then suddenly, boom, some eruption of submerged shadow trauma conditioning started to work its way out of your system and through, and that's a difficult process. I had my version of that.
Yeah, and I think, I was certainly ill prepared for that.
Yes, that's it.
I think
the teachings themselves seem to be insufficient.
Well, because it's not a teaching at that point. It's not something that's coming from the mind in terms of something you can grasp. It's something you have to live through. It's a felt experience that you are then living through.
So in a sense, it's almost like, leading up to that, certainly I had teachers, and certainly I and you both try to, help others through this thing. And up until, let's say, awakening or that stage, it seems to be a sort of a teaching of sorts, a satsang, a pointing. And then after that, actually, it's more like a mentoring.
Yeah.
And it's more like a hand holding. It's more like I'm with you. I've been here. Let's walk through this.
Exactly.
Let me show you what worked and help me through this.
It's inner led, as in the person who is going through it is going through it. It's inner led.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you can't be supported in that walking that you are going through.
I agree.
And I think my heart hurts actually for myself, but also more importantly, all those that walk through, having to walk through that without that feeling of support. Because it's not something that you can look to another for, in terms of to not walk through. You can't have another walk through that for you.
No.
It's something you have to go through it to get beyond it.
But there can be, the sense that you pointed to a minute ago, which was, so you come to this awakening, this self-realization, it's all swimming, and then something shows up, some difficult experiencing on the levels that we're talking about. And if you are ill prepared for it, in the sense that you think, this is wrong, this can't be right, and that itself becomes part of the suffering. This sense of wrongness, this sense that this shouldn't be here. I'm broken. Still,
this doubt.
I'm awake, and yet this is happening. This shouldn't be there. That those echoes can still carry on. So the context of understanding that, we as embodied beings are going to continue to integrate, release, discover parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
This idea of that our expectations can add, well, often this is true of all conditions, really. Our expectations really can add to our sufferings and our confusions and doubts themselves.
Yeah.
Because we don't we're not aware in our top-heavy society and culture and our starting point that there's this great depth of being that we are.
And we're often blind to.
And even within the spiritual context, there's often a sort of a life-denying aspect to it.
Yeah.
Life is the person is a problem to be solved.
Yeah.
Delusion, illusion, all that. Not all, but often that it's disembodied. Literally, the teachings themselves are about disembodying. Get out of it. Find yourself. You're just consciousness. Don't worry about it. The rest will take care of it.
But we are embodied. And it is my view that isn't a mistake.
No.
Isn't just, oops, we're going to die and then go back to where we need to go back to. And for me, there came a tipping point where I began to fall in love with this life. Last night we went and watched a sunset over the beach. We live right near the beach. And what struck me as we were watching this beautiful sunset is every breath of a second was changing. Every moment was fleeting and gone. Yeah. And the idea that somehow this is this shouldn't be.
Right.
This is just an accident. That life
it's a mistake. Let's just get back to the
formless, the absolute. Yeah. And I was struck by, as I was watching this sunset and feeling just the magnitude of the beauty of it, it reminded me of that tipping point, that shift that I would say I've gone through in the last couple of years into the absolute love and sense of sacredness of the embodied experience of living. That this isn't a mistake, that this is a gift.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about just the nice stuff. I'm, talking about sunsets, beautiful sunsets, but I'm talking about all of it, actually. The fact that I get to experience this moment, however fleeting this moment is such a precious thing. It's not a mistake. It's not something to get through.
It's that idea that if something is fleeting and transient, that it might as well not be then.
Yeah.
When you go to an art gallery full of masterpieces, beautiful, heart-stopping, wondrous images, and you wonder, you go, oh my gosh, look at that, and you wander out, and then you're done. And it's like reflecting, going, well, what's the point? It was just a moment, and it's all meaningless and all that. And that's a mental position.
It is.
And it's a nihilistic mental position that because something is fleeting, it's worthless, meaningless, whatever. Because
you stand in front of that painting, even if just for a few seconds, you drop into the felt experience of that. Oh.
And even though the nihilistic... the people who nihilistically make these claims of the meaninglessness, they're still participating in life. They're not actually enacting their philosophy because it's wrong. Because if they were, they wouldn't move.
Yeah.
There would be no preferences. There would be no value, nothing to do. But there is. We move. We live. We like this. We dislike that. We're embodied. We exist through contrasts.
Yeah.
And so, I'm with you. I see it as a divine play of an expression, not as a existential mistake made by being itself. It wants to live. Being itself is alive with its own.
If being was
qualities.
really indifferent to all of this, why would all of this be?
Yeah. I remember Maharshi was asked that question. Why bother? You know, why does consciousness bother to, you know, if it's content in its own thing? He said the sheer joy of existence.
Yeah.
There is, and that's the bliss aspect of it.
Yeah.
That's the Ananda.
And
it's
that's
like
the descending into the felt. The bliss is felt. It's not just a conceptual bliss.
No.
It's a felt experience of bliss, of joy, of love, of life.
Yeah, bubbling up in its own nature.
And that, in my experience at least, didn't really fully come online until I felt there was that descent starting to happen into the heart.
Mm-hmm. Into the felt sense.
Before that, there was a peace with life. There was a sense of contentment. There was a sense of non-war with life, for sure. There was a sense of indifference, but it was a neutral indifference. It wasn't a negative or a positive indifference per se. It was a fairly neutral indifference. And it was an emptiness, but not a negation of an emptiness. But it was just this vastness, this feeling of this vastness. But yeah, not the aliveness yet.
Okay, I think we're going to stop there. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoy. If you like, please like. If you feel like sharing with someone they think might enjoy this, please do. And certainly subscribe if you want to hear about the new episodes as they come along.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye for now.